The point of the gradual release of responsibility method is to move students from teacher understanding to student application. The first step of the process is I, or the teacher, do it. This involves a focus lesson where the teacher will go over basic vocabulary and grammar that the students are going to achieve during the lesson, as well as model several examples of this vocabulary or grammar being successfully used. The point of this is to give the students the building blocks they will need to move into creating that grammar or using that vocabulary on their own. During the We Do It stage, the teacher is responsible for guiding her students into creating material on their own. The teacher is there to facilitate student achievement. Some teachers prefer to do this as an entire group, and others prefer to break their activities down into small groups. For myself, I like to keep this stage of the activity as a class-wide collaboration. I think that helps get more questions out into the open before students break down into the following stages. This next stage is where the teacher removes herself from the equation entirely. It's very good during this stage to break your students down into small groups and give them an activity that allows them plenty of opportunity to collaborate and use the target vocabulary or grammar that they will need to practice and know. So, for example, an activity during this time in your class could be collaborating on a short story that uses a particular grammar form. It could be practicing a dialogue where the target vocabulary is used. In any case, you should be sure to allow your students plenty of time to collaborate and share what they understand from the focus lesson and from the previous stage. During this final stage, students move towards creating their own material by themselves. This is a great way of adding new activity types into your classroom. A you do it alone activity could be a worksheet, could be a test, could be individual content creation, could be many different heads down activities. At the end, students can share their work class-wide, or they can submit it to the teacher, who can use it as a gauge for how well her students have taken into understanding the applications of the grammar or vocabulary. So this final stage is very important in order to understand how well the teacher has conveyed the information she wanted to convey. Another very important thing to remember from this model, gradual release of responsibility, is that it is not necessarily linear. You can move back and forth between these stages within the same lesson, and in fact, it may take quite a while before your students are able to create their own material independently.
This morning I have a private student, Svetlana Wolfson, and she is very interested in working on grammar. Now, we have talked about the four tenses up front, the present, the past perfect, and the future, but she really wants to review past simple. So today I'm going to work on sentences, questions, as well as answers. And last class, we worked on 5 irregular verbs for present and past, so we will use these verbs as part of our example sentences today.
Because Svetlana didn't want to be filmed while she was in class, and because there was no one else to record the video of myself teaching, what I'll do is describe the methods that I used during each of the stages. During the first stage, I do it, I used one of our target verbs to create a sentence, just a basic sentence. And then we are able to move very quickly to stage 2 because the past simple is something Svetlana and I have already worked on together. So the second stage, we do it. I encouraged Svetlana to use our target verbs to create her own sentences. When she was struggling, I stepped in to provide an explanation for the reasons we have these grammar rules or to give her additional guidance. So, for example, her created sentence was, I told my son, be quiet. And I explained that she could do it multiple ways. For example, I told my son to be quiet, or I told my son, with air quotes, be quiet. Then we expanded that sentence into, I told my son to be quiet at school today. Svetlana is a private student, so that means, unfortunately, that there are no other students for her to collaborate with in class. That's why I step in and I play both the student and the teacher. One of the biggest things that we focus on during these private lessons is conversational English. So during the next stage, you do it together, we sat down and had a conversation about activities and events that had happened in the past. Now, occasionally I would break off to model some of this language on the board, proper use of verbs, proper construction of questions. But for the most part, we worked together. So she would ask me a question about something that I had done in the past using our target verbs, and then I would reciprocate by asking her information about her past. In this way, we do collaborative conversational English that, as best as possible, fills the stage 3, you do it together. The last stage is you do it alone. During this time, I asked Svetlana to write a short paragraph describing her early morning activities. So for example, I took my children to school, I drank some coffee, I found my car keys, and I drove to English class. During this stage, I was not involved in assisting her in preparing these sentences at all. I wanted to see how well she had absorbed the information, not just about the verbs, but also about the grammar. Afterwards, she read her paragraph to me, and I asked her certain questions. So for example, when she said, I drank coffee this morning, I asked, did you drink a big cup or a little cup? What kind of coffee did you drink? And she would have to respond using the past simple. So by the end of this class, it was clear to me that Svetlana had a fairly good grasp of the past simple. Of course, we will need to do additional refreshment during our following lessons to make sure that she retains this information, but the gradual release of responsibility method is really successful with her. She is confident in tackling activities on her own, and because we have to do so much collaboration, she really gets a good workout on her English conversational skills. So this is a sample lesson where I use the gradual release of responsibility method to teach 3 separate things in a private English lesson.